The first time I saw the kid standing in my doorway, I felt something go cold and then hot inside me so fast it almost made me dizzy. My wife had come into the bedroom on a Saturday afternoon and said there was a young man outside asking for me. She said she did not know him, had not asked his name, and from the look on her face I could already tell she did not like that he was there. I remember setting down the remote, walking down the hall and seeing this skinny, nervous-looking guy on my front step, maybe 19 or 20, shoulders tight, hands empty, staring at me like he had driven a long way to get there and was afraid he might still turn around. He looked familiar in a way that made no sense, not enough for recognition, more like some piece of him belonged to me already, and that was what unsettled me most. He asked if I was Glenn. I said yes and asked who he was. He swallowed, glanced once past me into the house, then said his name was Ethan. Then he added the rest in one breath, like he had practiced it too many times to stop halfway. He said he was Diane's son. He asked if I remembered her. He said we had known each other about 20 years earlier. He said we had dated. That did not feel like a click in my head. It felt like a hard blow. Of course I remembered Diane. Some people leave your life and still stay stored in you somewhere intact, like they never fully left at all. 20 years had gone by, but the second I heard her name, I saw her the way she had been then. Dark hair, quick smile, temper, jealous streak, laugh that could pull me in even when I knew better. Back then I had been crazy about her. So I stood there looking at this young man and asked the only thing I could ask. "You're Diane's son. What do you want with me?" He said it was delicate. He said he did not know how I was going to react. My wife was still a few steps back, close enough to hear every word, and the air in the room had changed already. I moved aside and told him to come in. I offered coffee, water, anything just to break the feeling in that room. He said he was fine. I pointed him toward the couch. He sat on the edge instead of leaning back, like he was ready to leave if I told him to. I sat across from him. My wife stayed in the armchair with her arms crossed so tight it looked painful. I asked again what this was about. He looked straight at me and said there was a strong chance I was his father. I almost choked. I mean, my throat actually closed. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. I turned and looked at my wife, and her face had gone blank in that dangerous way some people get when they are trying not to explode in front of company. I asked if his mother had told him that. He said no. He said his mother barely wanted to talk about it. He said his grandmother had told him, and when he mentioned her name, I remembered her too. Diane's mother, sharp eyes, knew everybody's business. I asked why his grandmother would say something like that after all those years. He told me Diane had found out she was pregnant soon after we broke up. I remember gripping my knee so hard, my hand hurt later. Because no, Diane had never told me that. Not once. After we split, our lives went different ways. I spent some time working outside town. Still, she knew where my mother lived. She knew how to find me. If there had been a child, I believed she would have reached out. At least that was what I believed until that Saturday afternoon. Ethan said he had been trying to find me for a while. Not for money, he made sure to say, right away. He looked embarrassed even bringing it up, like he hated having to defend himself before I accused him of anything. He said he did not want anything financially. He just wanted to know who his father was. He asked if I would agree to a paternity test. I looked at him then, really looked at him. His jaw, the way he held eye contact and then broke it, the little crease between his eyebrows when he was tense. I could not say he looked exactly like me because I was too shaken to trust myself. But there was something there, enough that my heart started pounding harder instead of calming down. I asked how old he was. 19, he said. That fit too well. He said I did not need to pay for the test. He said he would handle it. He was matter-of-fact about everything, but I could hear the strain under it. A kid trying to sound like a man because the question mattered too much. I told him yes. Maybe I answered too fast. Maybe any sensible person would have asked more questions first. But I had already crossed some line inside myself the second he said Diane's name. I needed to know. We exchanged numbers. We said we would talk in the next few days and set up the test. He stood, thanked me for hearing him out, and walked out the same front door he had changed my life through. After he left, the house stayed quiet in that fake way houses do right before a storm. My wife Nancy and I had been together 8 years. She had 2 daughters from her first marriage, one 18 and one 22. I had always treated them like my own. I loved those girls. Still, they were not mine in the way a man sometimes secretly aches for. I had always wanted a child of my own. Nancy had surgery years before I met her. Pregnancy was not possible for her anymore. I never blamed her for that. But I would be lying if I said the longing had not stayed with me. So when Ethan left and the door shut, I did not know what to do with what I was feeling. Shock, yes, fear too. But beneath those, something bigger and harder to admit. Hope. Nancy asked how much of what he said I believed. I told her I did not know yet. That was true, it just was not the whole truth. The whole truth was that some part of me had already started believing the second I saw his face. She started asking about Diane, how serious we had been, why I had never told her much about that relationship, whether there had been overlap with anyone else. Her questions came sharp and fast, not curious, not calm. By the time I answered the 4th one, I knew we were not having a conversation. We were stepping into a problem that had already begun growing roots. I tried to keep it steady. I said this had blindsided me too. I said if the kid was mine, that mattered. I said no decent man could turn away from a question like that. Nancy said decent men also did not let old girlfriends walk back into their lives and wreck their homes. I told her Diane had not walked into anything. Her son had shown up because he wanted the truth. Nancy did not answer. She just looked toward the front door, where he had been standing a few minutes earlier, and I could see something hardening in her. Sunday dragged. I kept seeing Ethan's face in my head. I kept replaying details from 20 years earlier, trying to remember dates, fights, the end of that relationship, anything that might tell me whether this was possible or not. The truth was, it was possible. And the more I admitted that, the harder it became to sit still. On Monday, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, and a woman said my name in a voice that reached into me before I even placed it. It was Diane. I had not heard her voice in 20 years, but some sounds do not leave you, they just go quiet. She said Ethan had given her my number. She asked if we could talk. I went outside onto the back step without even thinking, just to get some air and keep Nancy from hearing every word. Diane told me Ethan had already explained things. I said he had. She told me there was no reason to spend money on a test. She said she was completely sure. 100%. I was his father. I asked then what I should have asked 20 years earlier, if I had known there was a reason to ask. Why didn't you tell me? There was a long pause. Then she said she did not even know how to explain it anymore. She said she had been a mess back then. She said we had ended badly. Pride, anger, confusion, immaturity, all of it had gotten mixed together. She said by the time she might have reached out, too much time had passed, and she no longer knew how. That answer did not satisfy me. It could not. A man missing his son's entire childhood is not something time makes small. Still, I stayed on the phone with her. Maybe because anger was not the strongest feeling I had in that moment, or maybe because hearing her voice again did something to me I had not expected. We talked for almost half an hour. She told me where Ethan had gone to school, what kind of kid he had been. Quiet at first, then more outgoing as he got older. She told me he liked fixing things, liked engines, liked staying up too late. She told me he had always asked questions about his father, even when she tried not to answer them. She told me her mother had finally said too much. I did not realize until we hung up that I had leaned against the side of the house the whole time, staring at nothing. Even after Diane insisted the test was unnecessary, Ethan wanted it done. He was right to want proof. This was too big for trust alone, especially after so much time. We went to a lab later that week. It was one of those places with cold lighting and laminated forms, and a receptionist who did not care that the paper she handed us might change 2 lives. Ethan met me there. We filled out paperwork, gave samples, and then there was nothing to do but wait. Those 2 weeks were strange. Every day looked normal on the surface and wrong underneath. I went to work, paid bills, ate dinner, slept beside my wife, but inside I was waiting for a document with my name on it to tell me whether I had been a father for 19 years without knowing it. Nancy got worse during that time. She did not scream. Instead, she watched. She asked where I had gone, who I had spoken to, whether Diane had called again. Once, when my phone buzzed and I glanced at it without opening the message, Nancy asked if that was her in a tone so cold it seemed to lower the room temperature. I told her it was Ethan. That was true, it did not help. Nancy said she did not understand why they both needed access to me now. She asked what exactly they wanted after all this time. I told her I did not think Ethan wanted anything except the truth. She said that was how things always started. There are comments that are really warnings in disguise. That one was. I tried to reassure her. I said this was about doing right by a kid who might be mine. She said kid in a way that made the word sound insulting. He's 19, Glenn, not a child. Old enough to know what he's doing. Maybe he was, but I was beginning to think none of us knew what we were doing. The results came in on a Thursday. I still remember the envelope in my hand. Thin, ordinary, not worthy of what it contained. Ethan and I had agreed to open it together, so we met outside the lab after work. For a second, neither of us moved. Then we went inside. I read the paper once, then again because the first time my eyes blurred. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I was his father. Diane had been telling the truth. I always thought if I ever found out I had a child, my first feeling would be uncomplicated happiness. That was not how it happened. Happiness came, yes, it hit hard, but it came tangled with pain. 19 years, first steps I never saw, birthdays, school mornings, driving lessons, bad decisions, good ones. The whole shape of his life existed, and I had not been in any of it. Ethan looked at me like he was trying to read my face before allowing himself to react, so I stepped toward him and hugged him. He hugged me back just as hard. That was the first time I held my son. 1 minute he had been a question, the next minute he was real in my arms. We ended up at a diner afterward, trying to compress 19 years into one conversation. He told me more about himself. I told him more about me. He asked what kind of work I did. I asked what he wanted to do with his life. At one point he smiled and said he had imagined this moment so many times that now it did not feel real. It did not feel real to me either, but it felt important in a way nothing had in a long time. When I got home that night, Nancy was in the kitchen. She saw the envelope. She saw my face. She knew. "So it's true," she said. I said yes. She did not ask to see the result. She did not ask how I felt. She just wiped a clean counter with a dish towel that did not need to be in her hands. I tried to talk to her. I said I knew this was a lot. I said I wanted us to handle it carefully. She asked whether I was happy. I said I did not know how not to be. That was the wrong answer. Maybe the honest one, but the wrong one. Her mouth tightened. She turned to look at me fully then, and what I saw in her eyes was not only jealousy, it was fear. Fear of being displaced, of sharing space, of losing rank in a life she had thought was settled. I saw that. I just did not yet understand how much damage fear like that could do when it curdled. Over the next few days, I told my family. My mother cried. My sister asked 100 questions in 10 minutes. My brother laughed in disbelief and said life had finally run out of ordinary ways to surprise me. Once people got over the timeline and the secrecy, they were happy for me. Happy because they knew I had always wanted this, even if I rarely said it out loud. Nancy saw all of that too. One evening, after I got off the phone with my sister, Nancy stood in the bedroom doorway and told me she did not want me getting too close to Diane. Her exact words were that she knew Ethan was my son, but she did not want me mixing up the field. I told her Ethan was my son, which meant Diane was part of the picture whether either of us liked it or not. She said she did not mind Ethan. The way she said it let me know she absolutely did. He came by the house once after that, and Nancy barely hid her irritation. She was polite in the technical sense, no insults, no raised voice, just tight answers, no warmth, and that closed-off expression people wear when they want you to know you are not welcome without saying it. Ethan noticed. He stayed less than an hour. After he left, I asked Nancy what that had been. She said nothing. She said she had been civil. I said civil was not the same as kind. She asked whether I expected her to celebrate every time my old life came knocking. That was one of our first real fights over it. Not the worst. Just the first where I understood this was not going away on its own. I started meeting Ethan elsewhere after that. Coffee shops, parking lots, his place. At first I told Nancy each time. Then I started telling her less, not because I was doing anything wrong, but because every ordinary interaction became a trial. One Saturday, I drove over to Ethan's place alone. He lived with Diane, his younger brother, his younger sister, and Diane's mother in a small crowded house that felt loud in the way active homes do. Shoes by the door, a backpack against the couch, a half-finished school project on the table. There were traces of life everywhere. Diane opened the door. Time had changed both of us. Of course it had. Still, she had the same smile, the same eyes, the same way of tilting her head slightly when she was nervous and trying not to show it. It hit me harder than I wanted it to. Her mother, Barbara, welcomed me in like I was returning from a long trip nobody had ever admitted I was supposed to be on. She thanked me for recognizing Ethan as my son, which was a strange thing to thank a man for when science had just done the recognizing, but I understood what she meant. She was thanking me for not running. The younger kids watched me with the curiosity children say for adults who might matter later. I sat at that kitchen table and listened to stories about my son's life that should have been mine to witness. His first school suspension, the time he broke his arm falling off a dirt bike, his habit of taking radios apart when he was 10. Each story landed like both a gift and a punishment. I loved getting them. I hated needing them. I found myself watching Diane when she spoke to him, watching the ease between them, the shorthand built over years. It stirred up more than memory, something warmer, older, more dangerous. We exchanged numbers properly after that, not just through Ethan. At first the calls and messages stayed practical, scheduling, documents, questions about what Ethan needed. But those lines blur fast when history already exists between two people. One afternoon she texted to ask if I remembered a county fair where we had gotten caught in a summer storm. I did. We ended up talking for 40 minutes about a day from another life. A week later, she called to ask whether Ethan had mentioned trade school to me. That conversation turned into one about work, rent, her mother's health, and somehow our own lives now. Nothing openly wrong, nothing I could point to and say there, that was the moment. But something had started shifting. Nancy found the message thread one night when I left my phone on the dresser while I showered. The messages were not explicit, no flirting, no declarations, mostly logistics and a few shared memories that probably crossed a line only because of who they came from. That was enough. She met me when I came out of the bathroom with my phone in her hand, and a look I had not seen on her before. Not anger exactly, something sharper, more wounded and more humiliating. She asked if I was really doing this in our house. I asked what she was talking about. She held up the phone. From that point on, the argument was unavoidable. I told her she should not have gone through my messages. She said she would not have needed to if I were not hiding things. I told her I was not hiding anything. I was talking to the mother of my son. She laughed in this ugly, incredulous way and asked whether that was what we were calling it now. The fight got loud, louder than I like to remember. She pointed in my face. She said I had brought trouble into our home and then acted noble about it. She said she had seen this coming from the minute that boy walked through our door. I told her nothing had happened between Diane and me. That was true. Nancy said not yet. There are moments when a relationship changes shape and never fully changes back. That was one of them. After that, the house felt hostile every day. If I was quiet, I was thinking about Diane. If I looked at my phone, it was because I was waiting on Diane. If I left to see Ethan, Nancy wanted to know whether his mother would be there. If I said yes, she acted betrayed. If I said no, she acted suspicious. There was no right answer left. I tried to calm it down. I suggested counseling. She refused. I suggested boundaries. She said the only boundary she wanted was Diane out of my life, which was impossible unless I cut off my son too. At work, I started staying later than I needed to, not for extra money, not for any reason except the relief of delaying the drive home. Meanwhile, my relationship with Ethan kept deepening in the simplest ways. We got lunch, talked about cars. He started calling me to ask practical questions. Which mechanic I trusted, whether I knew how to handle something with a landlord, small things, ordinary things, father and son things. Every one of them mattered to me more than I let on. One afternoon, he asked if I could help him look at a used truck he was thinking of buying. I met him in a parking lot, crawled halfway under the thing in work clothes, and came away with grease on my hands and a stupid grin I could not hide. Because there I was doing something that should have happened years earlier, and for an hour it felt almost normal. Then I got home, and Nancy asked where I had been in a tone that turned even that good memory sour. The escalation was slow enough to seem survivable while it was happening. That was the trick of it. A hard comment, then a fight, then a week of tension, then another accusation. You tell yourself it will settle once the shock wears off. It did not settle. It got meaner. One night, Nancy said if Diane had kept my son from me for 19 years, maybe she was not someone I should trust now. I said maybe she wasn't, but Ethan still needed me. Nancy said maybe Ethan only needed what Diane wanted him to want. When she said that, I felt something in me pull away. I still stayed. I still tried. That matters to me, maybe more than it should, because later, when everything fell apart, I did not want to lie to myself about having rushed it. I did not. I worked at that marriage. The final stretch came after months of living in that poison. A Saturday ruined because Ethan stopped by to drop off paperwork and Nancy refused to come out of the bedroom. A Wednesday night argument because Diane called about a clerical issue and Nancy heard her voice through the speaker. A Sunday where I went to a birthday cookout for Ethan's younger sister and came home to accusations before I was even fully through the door. Every time I insisted on the same thing. I had never cheated on Nancy. I had never crossed that line while we were together. Discovering I had a son did not mean I had plotted some reunion. It meant reality had changed faster than our marriage could handle. Nancy never believed that. Or maybe belief was never the issue. Maybe the situation itself was already too much for her to survive with any grace. Toward the end, I found myself sitting in my truck after work, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, trying to decide whether I had enough strength left for whatever version of the night was waiting for me inside. That was when I knew something had broken beyond repair. The decision to separate did not come in a dramatic scene with packed bags by the door and thunder outside. It came after too many ordinary evenings had turned into battlefields. One night we fought again, over nothing on the surface and everything underneath. Nancy said she was tired of feeling like a fool in her own home. I said I was tired of being treated like I had done something shameful by acknowledging my son existed. She asked if I wanted to leave. I said I did not want to live like that anymore. Neither did she. Sometimes endings are less an explosion than a surrender. A week later, I was in a small rental place by myself, sleeping on a mattress that felt temporary in every sense. 8 years gone. There were forms, bills, dividing things, awkward conversations with the girls, all the ugly practical debris of separation. But emotionally, the real break had happened earlier, one accusation at a time. I did not feel free at first. I felt hollow and guilty and relieved, which made the guilt worse. What I could not admit then, not fully, was that once I was alone, there was also more room in my life. More room for Ethan, which meant inevitably more room for Diane. And that was where the next part of my life started to turn into something else entirely. After Nancy and I separated, the silence in that rental hit me hardest at night. During the day I could keep moving. Work helped. Errands helped. Even stupid things helped, like driving farther than necessary to buy coffee or stopping at a hardware store when I did not need anything. But nighttime was different. I would sit at that small kitchen table with one plate in the sink, one lamp on, and hear every sound the place made. The fridge cycling on, pipes ticking in the wall, my own chair scraping when I got up for no reason. 8 years with someone, even a relationship that has turned bitter, leaves a shape behind when it ends. I could feel that shape everywhere. At the same time, my life was changing fast in another direction. Ethan started coming around more. We got into a rhythm that should have existed years earlier and somehow still felt natural. He would call and ask if I wanted to grab lunch. I would swing by if he needed a ride somewhere. Once he came over with a box of old photographs his grandmother had dug out, and we sat there side by side on my couch, looking at pieces of a life I had missed. There was one picture of Diane holding him as a baby in a hospital chair, hair pulled back, face tired, eyes fixed on him in that stunned way new parents have. I stared at it longer than I meant to, because that photograph did something to me. It made the loss visible. Before that, what I had missed was a concept. Childhood, years, milestones. But in that picture I could suddenly see a specific moment I should have existed inside. Not as a fantasy, as a fact. A room, a baby, the woman I had once loved, and me, nowhere. Ethan noticed I had gone quiet. He asked if I was okay. I told him yes, but it came out rough. He nodded like he understood more than I wanted him to. That was one thing I started learning about my son. He paid attention, not in a loud way, quietly. He watched people, picked up tones, stored things. Sometimes he reminded me of myself so much it felt unfair. The practical stuff kept moving too. We had to deal with legal paperwork, birth records, the process of adding my name where it had never been. Government offices, appointments, signatures, people behind counters talking in flat voices about forms that, to me, felt almost sacred. Every step made it more official, more real, and every step brought Diane back into my orbit. At first, it stayed clean. Purely co-parenting, even though our son was already grown. We would coordinate paperwork, talk about Ethan's plans, compare notes on what he might need from each of us. Sometimes she filled in blanks from the past. Sometimes I asked questions I had carried around for weeks and finally could not hold anymore. What was he like as a little kid? Did he get sick a lot? Did he ever ask about me directly? Did he look like me when he was younger, or was I imagining it now? Those conversations did not feel romantic. They felt raw, necessary. And if I am honest, they also felt intimate in a way I had not expected. Intimacy does not always start with flirting. Sometimes it starts with shared responsibility, unfinished history, and old trust finding a crack to come back through. A couple of weeks after I moved out, Ethan invited me over for Sunday lunch. I almost said no, not because I did not want to go, because I knew exactly what it would mean to sit at that table again, to be folded a little further into that house, to be around Diane in a setting that felt domestic, warm, easy. I knew enough about myself to know that danger does not always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it looks like comfort. Still, I went. Barbara made roast chicken. The younger kids argued about something at the table. Diane rolled her eyes at them in that tired mother way that somehow made her look both older and softer than I remembered. Ethan sat across from me and kept including me in small things, asking if I wanted more potatoes, telling me to try the cornbread, acting as if I had already been part of those Sundays for years. That got to me. I do not think the rest of them understood how much it got to me. At one point, Barbara said, almost casually, that it was nice seeing the family together. No one said anything for a second after that, not because it was offensive, because it landed too deep. Diane looked down at her plate. Ethan kept eating, but slower. I forced a smile and changed the subject. Still, the word stayed with me all afternoon. Family. It was too early for that word. Too complicated, too loaded, and yet part of me wanted it. That was the problem. After lunch, Ethan went outside with his younger brother to look at something in the driveway. Barbara took the girl to a neighbor's for a few minutes. Diane and I ended up alone in the kitchen. The room had gone quiet in a way that made every small sound stand out. The faucet, a spoon against a bowl, her bracelet brushing the counter. She asked how I was doing in the new place. I said I was managing. She asked if Nancy was making the separation difficult. I said not more than separations usually are, which was only half true. Then she said she was sorry. I asked for what? For everything, she said. For not telling me, for how things had played out, for how late the truth had come. She did not cry. She was not dramatic about it. She just stood there drying a plate and said she knew there was no excuse big enough for 19 years. That honesty made it harder to stay guarded. I told her I had spent a lot of time being angry about it. I still did not know where to put that anger. Some of it belonged to the past. Some of it belonged nowhere useful now. She nodded and said she understood. Then she looked at me in this open, almost defenseless way and said she had been young, stubborn, stupid, scared, all at once. She said after we broke up, she found out she was pregnant and convinced herself I would reject her, or accuse her, or make things uglier. Then time passed and every month made the silence harder to undo. Then Ethan was born, and life became survival. Work, bills, another relationship, more children, more mistakes. She said sometimes a bad decision grows roots before you even realize what you have done. That line stayed with me because it felt true. Not noble, not pretty, just true. I told her I should probably hate her for it. She gave a sad little smile and said she had hated herself enough for both of us at different points. There are sentences that do not ask for forgiveness, but still weaken your anger. That was one of them. I did not touch her, did not move closer. But when Ethan and the others came back in, something had shifted again. That became the pattern of those weeks. One lunch led to another. A paperwork errand turned into coffee after. A call about Ethan's plans turned into a longer conversation. I started going over there every other weekend, then most weekends. Nothing about it felt rushed from the inside. though maybe it would have looked obvious to anyone outside us. I told myself the same thing each time. I was there for my son. That was not a lie. It just was not the whole truth anymore. There was one Saturday when Ethan had gone out with friends, the younger kids were at their father's, and Barbara was visiting her sister. Diane and I ended up sitting on the porch with iced tea, talking while the light faded. At first it was ordinary, jobs, rent. How weird it still felt that Ethan had found me. Then the conversation drifted backward. The old apartment we once had. The stupid fights. The concert we missed because her car broke down. The way we used to waste whole evenings driving with no plan. Memory is dangerous when it arrives warmed by nostalgia and regret. At one point, she laughed at something I said and put her hand on my arm for maybe 2 seconds. That should not have mattered, it did. Not because it was dramatic, because it felt familiar in my body before my mind had time to censor it. I left early that night and drove around for almost an hour before going home. Windows down, radio off, trying to clear my head. I kept telling myself I was too old for confusion like that. Too old to start letting old feelings write checks the rest of my life might have to cash. I had just come out of one broken household. The last thing I needed was to stumble blindly into another mess built on memory and loneliness. So I made a decision. I was going to pull back, keep things focused on Ethan, stay polite with Diane but cleaner, narrower, safer. I lasted maybe 10 days, because life does not respect neat plans when emotions are already loose. During those 10 days, Ethan called more than usual. He wanted help looking over a job offer. He wanted my opinion on a used set of tools. He wanted to know if I could come by and show him how to patch some damage on a wall before his landlord noticed. Every road led there. Every practical thing brought me back into that house and into Diane's presence. Then came the Sunday that broke whatever discipline I had left. Diane and I had gone out for lunch, just the two of us. It was not planned as a date. At least that was not the official story. Ethan was working. The younger kids were out. She had to run an errand across town and asked whether I wanted to grab something to eat after. I said yes too quickly. We ended up at a small place off the highway, the kind with laminated menus and too much ice in the drinks. Nothing romantic about it, which may have made it easier to pretend. We talked for almost 2 hours. Not about Ethan, at least not mainly. About ourselves, the lives we had lived in between, the people we became, the disappointments, the ways time had humbled us. She told me about her long relationship with the father of her younger 2 children, how it had worn down rather than exploded. I told her more than I had planned about Nancy and me, not the ugly details, just the emotional shape of it. The distance that grew, the constant suspicion, the exhaustion. Diane listened in a way few people do, without interrupting to make it about herself, without giving advice too soon, just listening. When we walked out to the parking lot, neither of us seemed ready to leave. She stood by her car, keys in hand, and there was this moment where both of us knew something had reached the edge. I do not know who moved first. Maybe both of us. All I know is we kissed. It was not tentative. That was the shocking part. It was 20 years and 2 full lives later, and the kiss still felt like something our bodies recognized before our minds signed off on it. I pulled back first, not because I did not want more, because I wanted too much too quickly, and that scared me. She looked as shaken as I felt. I said we probably should not do that. She gave a breathless little laugh and said that was probably true. Then we stood there another few seconds doing absolutely nothing sensible. What happened next was not sensible either. We ended up at a motel. I could make myself sound more dignified here if I wanted. Say it happened slowly. Say there was more hesitation. There was some, yes. But the truth is the line once crossed vanished fast. Old desire, unresolved history, loneliness, relief, grief, All of it got mixed together. By the time we were in that room, it felt less like the beginning of something and more like something unfinished, finally refusing to stay unfinished. Afterward, reality came back in patches, the air conditioner rattling, the cheap lamp on the nightstand, her hair across the pillow, my own thoughts, suddenly louder. I remember staring at the ceiling and feeling both deeply calm and deeply unsettled, because on one level it felt inevitable. On another, it changed everything. She was quiet too, not ashamed exactly, more like she was listening to the future arrive. I asked if she regretted it. She said no. Then after a pause, she said that was what worried her. From there, we slipped into something real almost before either of us admitted it. We started talking every day. At first messages, then calls, then nights when she would come over after the kids were settled and leave early in the morning. Sometimes she stayed the whole night. Sometimes we would eat takeout at my place, watch half a movie, and end up talking instead. About old things, new things. Ethan, the younger kids, money, aging, the strange fact that we had somehow been given each other back in the middle of such chaos. One night after she stayed over, we were lying in bed in that soft quiet after sex when the idea came out of my mouth before I had fully shaped it. I told her she could move in with me. She turned on one elbow and looked at me like she was not sure I understood what I was saying. I told her I did. I said I was serious. I said we had already lost enough time. I said I did not just want scattered nights and borrowed weekends. I wanted mornings, routines, a real life. She smiled in this warm, sad way and asked if I was trying to recover 20 years in a month. Maybe I was. She said it was too soon, not because she did not care, because she had 2 younger kids still at home, and Ethan and a mother under the same roof, and a whole practical life that could not be picked up just because old feelings had come roaring back. She said we needed to go slow enough not to turn something precious into something reckless. She was right. I knew she was right. Still, part of me hated hearing it, because the hunger in me by then was not only physical or romantic, it was structural. I wanted my life rearranged around this new truth, around my son, around the woman who had come back carrying half my past and now, somehow, part of my future too. So we kept going as we were, and for a while it worked. I would see Ethan during the week sometimes, help him with things, meet him for lunch, call him. I would see Diane when we could carve out the time. Sundays became our easiest day. Sometimes all of us would eat together. Sometimes just me and her would get a couple of hours alone. It was not clean. It was not conventional. But there was joy in it, and I had not had enough joy lately to turn away from something that felt alive. The problem with happiness after a period of chaos is that it can make you careless. You start to believe life owes you a soft stretch. It does not. A few months into this new arrangement, Nancy showed up. To this day, I still do not know exactly why. Maybe she wanted to reconcile. Maybe she wanted to check on me. Maybe she wanted proof of something she had already decided was true. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she was angry. People do not always arrive for one clean reason. It was a Saturday afternoon. Diane was at my place. Ethan had stopped by earlier and left. We were in the kitchen, not doing anything dramatic, just talking while I made coffee. Then there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw Nancy. For 1 second, none of us moved. She looked past me into the apartment and saw Diane standing by the counter, and there it was. The visual confirmation she had built entire fights around months earlier. Her face changed fast, not shocked exactly, because this must have been what she expected. More like vindicated in the cruelest possible way, as if a wound she had carried had just been handed a body. She asked very quietly if I was kidding her. I said it was not what she thought. The second those words left my mouth, I knew how ridiculous they sounded. Not because the present situation was innocent, it was not. Diane was in my kitchen. We were together by then. But because Nancy would hear the sentence in the most obvious way possible, as denial, as insult. What I meant was that while Nancy and I had still been together, nothing had happened between Diane and me. That had always been the truth, even after Ethan appeared, even after the test, even after the calls. The line had held until after the separation. But there are moments when timing no longer saves you, because the image in front of someone says everything they already fear. Nancy asked how long. I told her honestly. She did not believe the timeline. Or maybe she believed it and hated it anyway. Diane tried once to speak, maybe to calm things down, maybe to explain, but Nancy cut her off immediately, not screaming, somehow worse, cold, clipped, disgusted. She said she had known from the beginning what kind of woman Diane was. Diane went pale but did not answer back. That mattered to me. Because Diane could have fought. She had the temperament for it. The younger version of her definitely would have. But she stayed still and let Nancy throw the words, because she understood maybe better than I did in that moment that none of this pain could be argued away at the doorway. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me so the whole thing would not become a spectacle. Nancy asked if I had been lying to her face the entire time. I said no. She asked if I expected her to believe I had just accidentally fallen back into bed with the mother of my son once she was out of the picture. I said I was not asking her to believe anything anymore. I was telling her what had happened. That was the wrong thing to say, too, because it sounded detached, almost cruel, when what I meant was exhausted honesty. I had no energy left to negotiate old perceptions. Nancy looked at me for a long time, and I saw something close in her. Then she said she hoped all of it was worth it. And she left. I stood there in the hallway for a full minute after she was gone. Not because I was having second thoughts about Diane. I was not. But because even when an ending is already real, there can still be one final moment that nails it shut. That was ours. When I went back inside, Diane was still by the counter. She asked if I was okay. I said I did not know yet. That was true. There was relief in me and guilt in me and sadness in me, all at once. Not because I wanted Nancy back. I did not. Because I hated the ugliness of how things looked. Hated that some version of her would probably always tell that story, as proof she had been right all along. Maybe from where she stood, she was. But truth and timing are not always as simple as they appear in the scene that survives. The weeks after that were strangely calm. Nancy did not show up again. She did not try to restart anything. We handled the remaining practical separation matters through short conversations and later, mostly through distance. Her daughters stayed polite with me. Hurt, I think, but polite. I respected that. I never tried to force explanations they had not asked for. Meanwhile, what I had with Diane stopped feeling like an accident and started feeling like a relationship with weight. We were not kids this time. There was less drama in the daily shape of it and more reality. Her younger children had to be considered. Ethan had feelings about the whole thing too, of course, even though he tried to play it cool. Imagine being 19 and discovering your father, then watching your parents, who have not seen each other in 2 decades, find their way back toward each other. I asked him once if it was weird for him. He laughed and said weird was not a strong enough word. Then he shrugged and said if we were happy, that was what mattered. Still, I noticed he watched us sometimes, not suspiciously, carefully, like someone checking whether something fragile was being handled right. That made me more careful too. I did not want Ethan feeling like his search for me had accidentally triggered a mess he now had to emotionally supervise. I told him more than once that whatever happened between me and Diane was between adults and not his burden. He said he knew. I hoped he did. There were also practical complications. Diane could not just move in with me. Her younger two still needed stability. Barbara depended on her. Money was tight. The house they were in was not ideal, but it was functional. So instead of some big romantic merger, what we built was incremental. I spent more evenings there. She spent more weekends at my place when she could. We learned each other again around real life instead of fantasy. And that, more than the motel or the first kiss, was what convinced me this was real. Fantasy lives well in stolen moments. Reality shows itself in routines, in groceries, in headaches, in being tired, in talking through bills, in seeing someone irritated and still wanting to stay. Diane and I had enough history to light the spark, but it was the ordinary part that made me think maybe this time we had a chance. There were moments, though, when the lost years hit harder than the happiness. One evening, Ethan invited me to watch him play in a local recreational league game. Nothing major, just something he did with friends. I stood on cold metal bleachers with a paper cup of bad coffee and watched my son move across the field under cheap lights. At one point, he glanced toward the stands and found me there, and I lifted a hand. He lifted his back. It was such a simple thing. It almost broke me, because it was ordinary. Fathers in bleachers, fathers by sidelines, fathers showing up. That should never have been extraordinary. But for me it was. I sat there afterward with wet eyes pretending the wind was the reason. Another time, he asked me what kind of music I used to listen to at his age. We spent half the night making each other playlists like we were trying to bridge 19 years with songs. I would catch myself laughing and then feel grief underneath it. Not enough to poison the moment, just enough to remind me what had been stolen. That grief never fully left. It just learned to live beside gratitude. As for Diane, she and I talked more honestly than we ever had when we were young. Back then we were all heat, pride, impulse, possessiveness, attraction. We had loved each other badly in a way some young people do, with more intensity than wisdom. This time there was tenderness in it too, regret, restraint, the knowledge that life can take things away and not return them. That knowledge made us softer with each other. Not always. We still had disagreements. Old habits do not die completely. She could still get sharp when stressed. I could still shut down when hurt. But we recovered faster. We said what we meant more clearly. We were less interested in winning. One night she asked me whether I thought this had all been fate. I laughed because that sounded more mystical than either of us usually were. But I knew what she meant. The impossible path from a Saturday knock on my door to this strange, rebuilt life. I told her I did not know about fate. I just knew some things feel random while they are happening and inevitable once you are looking back. She said Ethan finding me felt that way to her. I said to me too. Then she asked if I had ever stopped loving her. That was not an easy question because the truthful answer was messy. I told her I had stopped living as if I loved her, which was different. Time had buried the feeling deep enough that I thought it was gone. But hearing her voice again, seeing her face, being around her with all that history still alive underneath, it had not felt like something brand new. It had felt like finding a room in an old house I thought had been demolished. She cried a little at that, quietly, not dramatically, just enough for me to pull her closer and understand that whatever else our story had been, it had never been nothing. By the end of that first year after Ethan found me, my life looked nothing like it had before. I had a son in it now, not as an idea, as a daily fact. He called me, teased me, asked my advice, disagreed with me, hugged me goodbye, borrowed tools, and forgot to return them for weeks. He had his own scars, his own habits, his own full life, and I was learning him in real time. I also had Diane back in my life, not in the fantasy form memory preserves, but as the woman she had actually become, a mother, a survivor, Someone flawed, complicated, warm, stubborn, and somehow still capable of making me feel 20 and 50 at the same time. Was it clean? No. Was it easy? Not always. Would I recommend anyone live this exact sequence of events? Absolutely not. But when I step back and look at the shape of it, I cannot deny what it gave me. I lost a marriage. That is true. A home too, in the way homes are more than walls. There was pain in that loss and guilt in the way it all ended. There are probably people who would hear this story and decide very quickly who the villain is. Maybe they would pick Nancy. Maybe Diane, maybe me. Real life is uglier than those fast judgments and also simpler. Everyone here acted out of fear or longing or old damage at some point. Everyone left marks. Still, if I am honest about what changed me most, it was not the fights, not the suspicion, not even the rekindled love. It was the moment my son appeared at my door and asked if I was Glenn. Everything split there. Before that, my life was moving in one direction, settled even in its frustrations. After that it opened, painfully, messily, but completely. That one knock exposed a hidden layer under everything I thought my life was. A son I never knew, a love I never fully buried, a future I had not imagined because I thought certain doors were sealed forever. I am not naive. I know recovered happiness can still be fragile. Families do not magically become simple because blood connects them. Blended lives take work. Forgiveness takes work. Trust takes work. Diane and I still have things to solve. Practical things, emotional things, timing, space, the younger kids, money, all of it. We are not living in some perfect ending tied up with a ribbon. But I can see it now. A shared home eventually. Ethan coming and going like he belongs there because he does. Her younger two growing used to me not as a guest, but as part of the structure. Mornings that do not feel borrowed. A kitchen that belongs to both of us. The ordinary intimacy of no longer having to leave. Maybe that sounds sentimental. Maybe it is. At my age, I do not care as much about sounding tough as I once did. There is a line I keep coming back to in my head, not because it is poetic, because it is the simplest true thing I know. I thought life had finished deciding certain things for me. That was my mistake. I thought fatherhood had passed me by. It had not. It had just arrived late, carrying 19 years of pain with it. I thought Diane was someone I had loved once and filed away in the locked part of the past. She was not. She was a door I had closed without knowing the house behind it would open again. And Ethan, whether he knows it or not, was the one who opened all of it. He went looking for an answer and ended up changing 3 lives at once. Mine, most of all. Sometimes I still think about that first afternoon. Me in the bedroom. Nancy calling me out. The young man on the doorstep. The strange familiar feeling before I even knew his name. If I had ignored the knock, if I had told Nancy to say I was not home, if Ethan had lost his nerve and driven away, everything after that would have disappeared before it began. But he stayed. He asked the question, and I opened the door. Since then, I have learned something I wish I had understood years earlier. A life can look finished from the outside and still be hiding its most important chapter. The hand you think is empty may already be holding the line that changes everything. I spent years believing I had missed my chance to be a father and buried my old love so deep it could never return. Then one Saturday afternoon, my past stepped onto my porch in my son's face, and the life I thought was over finally began telling me the truth. What would you do in this situation? Be honest, or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day. and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.